Why are you moving so slow? Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the town of Waukesha for joint public hearings and plan commission meeting on April 12th, 2018, beginning at 6:01. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Supervisor Wolf?
Here.
Supervisor Radke?
Here.
Chairman Merrick?
Present.
Supervisor Durr?
Here.
Supervisor Wolf? Supervisor
Here.
Fisher?
I'm here too.
Commissioner Stigler?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez and Flanagan are absent. Thank you.
Very good. And Madam Clerk, have we met the open meetings law requirements?
Yes, we have.
And we can begin then with number 5, public hearing. And we've got a wonderful attendance from the county tonight, and she's going to read the public hearing.
Notice is hereby given that a joint public hearing will be conducted by the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission, Town Board, and a staff representative of the Waukesha County Department of Parks and Land Use, Planning and Zoning Division on Thursday, April 12th, 2018 at 6 p.m. in the offices of the Waukesha Town Hall, located at West 250 South 3567 Center Road, Waukesha, Wisconsin, to consider the rezone request RZ7 of Fred Lathers LLC of 789 North Water Street in Milwaukee to amend conditions of a previously approved rezone SCT 1817A in order to accommodate 4 single-family residential lots. The subject properties are described as follows: part of the southwest quarter of Section 29 and part of the northwest quarter of Section 32, Town 6 North, Range 19 East, Town of Waukesha. More specifically, the properties are located on the west side of County Highway I, otherwise known as River Road, south of Foxville Court. Legal notice was published in the Waukesha Now on Wednesday, March 28, 2018, and Wednesday, April 4th of 2018.
Thank you. And we can begin with Planner Malarkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the existing lots on the west side of County Trunk Highway I were approved as part of a 3-lot CSM in 2016. There's lots 1 and lots 2, and then an outlot 1. Outlot 1 was dedicated to Waukesha County for park purposes, included wetlands, floodplain, and environmental corridor. At the time, the petitioner also rezoned lots 1 and 2 from A1 Ag to R1 Single Family Residential District in both the town and the county because there is shoreline zoning on a portion of these lots as well. At the time, the rezoning included a condition that the property be developed in conformance to the development proposal that was presented at the time. So that is the reason for the rezoning here, because they're going from 2 lots now to 4 residential lots. So it needs to be rezoned from R1 with those specific conditions to R1 without the condition that was tied to the previous development. They're also, so as I mentioned, they're requesting a redivision of lots 1 and 2 into 4 single-family residential lots. The petitioner has stated that there's no intention to further subdivide these lots. The CSM is addressed under a separate item later on. The previous conditions that were tied to the rezoning for the town were, 1, as I mentioned, the substantial conformance to the development proposal that was presented on July 14th, 2016. 2, that the certified survey map was recorded as described at the time, and that the county also approve it because of the shoreline zoning restrictions. A little bit of previous history for the property. I won't go into too much detail here, but Fiduciary owns both the subject properties on the west side of County Trunk Highway I, as well as the 3 lots on the east side of County Trunk Highway I. In 2011, both the town and the county's land use plans for the total holdings, both the west side and the east side of the road, the land use plans were amended. In the town, the maximum density is 1.1 dwelling units per acre, and in the county, it's 1.5 dwelling units per acre with up to 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres for the environmental corridors. So essentially what this meant was that for the total holdings, both the west and east side of the road, up to 48 total units were allowed under the county's more restrictive land use requirements. The other requirement was that the east side of the road be developed as a conservation subdivision per the county. So what that allowed them to do was up to 8 units on the west side of the property. They're no longer proposing 8 units on the west side. They're proposing a total of 4 with the land division. This would be the final configuration for the petitioner. In addition, based on the configuration of the lots on the west side, access, because of the limited access and the limited depth of the lots for septic systems, I'm not really sure how more than 4 single-family lots could function on the west side as well. That was also a concern of the county. So 4 lots seems to be the maximum either way for single-family purposes. If the Plan Commission should choose to approve this, I've put together a series of conditions. The first condition is the approval of the certified survey map that is part of this. Lots 1 through 4 would not be further subdivided. The petitioner would record a deed restriction on each of the 4 lots in a form approved by the town attorney, giving notice that the use is limited to single-family residential only, and then the rest are standard conditions.
Thank you. And I see we've got the petitioner from Fiduciary here this evening. Did you want to speak?
No, I think Sean did a great job.
Sean covered it all. Then we can open up the public hearing. Any comments from the county?
I just want to point out that fiduciary did mark the access locations that are shown on the CSM, and Department of Public Works go out there, I believe on Tuesday, and approved them. They do meet the site distance requirements. So those 3 access locations are okay. And environmental health has a series of soil tests for the septic systems from the previous development. And as Sean stated, they felt comfortable with single family lots, but going forward, they didn't know how they would increase the size of the septic systems if it were to be divided any further. And finally, the Land Resources Division, their ordinance enacted with the CSM because of the creation of more than 3 lots. So they do need a stormwater management plan from the Land Resources Division with this proposal.
Thank you.
I have a question for the county, Mr. Chairman. How is the county going to interpret the right, for lack of a better word, of the ultimate development having 48 units? And I'll be more specific. Are they going to now allow a 44 across the street instead of 40?
Not necessarily. I think it will ultimately depend on what the carrying capacity of the land is. With the previous development, it was difficult to even get 40 units on that lot, or on the lands as a whole, which I think that's what they were proposing. We want to give consideration to the fact that lands were dedicated to the county parks for the Fox River Greenway, but it's important to take into account what will be proposed at the time, should those lots ever be further divided more than the single family use that is tied to the lot right now.
I'm talking about, there were 8 on this side of the
Right.
road and there are 40 on the other side of it.
Right.
Now I'm confused by your statement because I thought we were going to condition it that the maximum is 4 single-family units on this side of the road.
And we would agree with that.
Okay, and no 2 families. I mean,
Right.
We got to tighten up that language. We've been back and forth so often, Sean, that I just couldn't bear to, but because duplexes are single-family residential units, there's just 2 of them side by side.
I don't know if our code defines them that way.
Okay, if you're comfortable that, but we got to make it very clear.
And our,
And all we're trying to do is make it clear to the future purchasers of these
Right.
lots what their rights are. I personally don't have an opinion whether it can be 8 units or a maximum of 8 units. I just said, just so you know where this discussion came from. I said, now we're going to have 4 buyers. Can one of them put 4 on theirs and everybody else gets 1? Or how do you divide up the 8? They went to fiduciary. Fiduciary said it is our plan to sell them as 1 unit per lot. So it is not an issue, and they said they were comfortable with conditioning it that way. And I want to make sure that we word it such if that's what they're comfortable with, that's what the county's comfortable with, that's what your planner's recommending, we got to make sure we word it that way so no one's confused as to whether, if they can figure out a way to do a septic, they can have a side-by-side.
yeah, that is a pretty big issue, making sure that the septic, if you're going to propose duplexes there, that there is enough room for the septics. That is a concern that environmental health had. Access is another concern. These 3 access locations are it. They're all that's going to fit for the road frontage that they have on that property. And R1 does not allow multifamily units in the county's zoning jurisdiction. So they'd have to go to an R3 zoning. They'd have to go for another rezone if someone were to propose that. And I can't imagine we would be supportive of that given the history here and everything that we've just talked about.
So we need to condition it to make it very clear that this side of the road now is limited to 4, 1 per lot, for the density, give you 4 units. That we understand, and we got to make sure, but I still don't know, because the other side of the road isn't, so we're not really not going to resolve it, whether those 4 are lost or whether those 4, if they can figure out a way to do it. There's always if they can figure out a way to do it.
I think that's the key here. They're not necessarily lost units. It's if a development can come forth that could fit 44 units on those lands and they are complying with the town and county's ordinances. I think it's primarily in the town's jurisdiction that the county only has a small portion of it there in the back. So that they would be permitted to do that. And I think condition 1 of the land use plan amendment that says it needs to be a conservation subdivision, that also holds. If someone
Right, the comp plan
proposes,
still holds.
Yes, if someone proposes something other than a conservation subdivision, then the 1.5 acres per dwelling unit that suburban density one land use plan category is not in effect.
I believe the county's land use plan is the limiting factor here,
Right.
though. It's 1.5 where the
Right.
town is 1.1 at a maximum units per acre. So it's ultimately gonna come down to the county's interpretation of what the density is for the east side, since yours is more restrictive.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if someone did not propose a conservation design subdivision, then
That wouldn't fly anyways.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so we got to make sure the conditions are tight enough to make sure, and we just direct the planner to make sure, and we can make sure in the deed restriction that that's clear. And the last one, because it always comes up, if we limit it to one single-family residential unit per, can they still have an in-law? I hate to belabor this, but this is where years later somebody says, well, you put this condition on that it has to be limited to a single family. I don't want to live next to an in-law unit. And I would think that we want to just make it clear that, and potentially, if the conditional use is granted for the in-law unit, I don't know that anybody has a problem. But I don't want to be vague in our approvals tonight after 15 or 20 years of working on this property.
the county does allow in-law units on the R1 residential district with a conditional use permit and site plan of operation, given that they can meet the requirements of the CU that's stated in the ordinance.
Same as the town. So the question is, do we exclude them explicitly, or do we let it ride for later on?
And that's the policy decision. I don't think we intended to include them, but somebody reading this literally could say they can't get conditional uses, they can only have a single family residential only. I think we might want to say giving notice that the use is limited to a single family residential unit and allowable CUs if granted. Because there are other conditional uses that might be allowed there too.
Well, no, because the other allowable CUs include multifamily.
Not their zoning.
Not theirs, right. Not theirs.
And theirs is going to control largely.
Right, because half of the lots are county's own.
So why don't we just add the conditional use for an in-law suite? Is it,
We
is,
can do that. I don't
is
know if there
optional.
are.
And 4 single-family units or a single-family unit and allowable conditional use.
Well, the planner's recommending that that's too broad. Because there are certain CUs that.
I'm saying there's other residential uses in CU that would be more dense than single family. So we're talking about in-law unit only here is the issue. So the question is, do we
Okay,
want?
so we'd say notice that the use is limited to a single family residential unit per lot, as well as a conditional use for an in-law unit if the same is approved. And then they can't get any other CU, they can just get those. That's fine. I'm not trying to write your policy. You gotta decide if that's what you want. But that doesn't allow any other CUs. I don't know if we have commercial truck parking or, what else we might have that they would not be allowed to apply for then.
I'm not sure if that's, and maybe that is the intention, but maybe we should think about just calling out just an in-law unit approval, or including that as part of a single family. When you say a single family instead of just single family, I take that to mean that in-law units with a conditional use, as just stated in the ordinance, would be allowed, but I don't know if you'd want to necessarily limit the lots from other CUs should they be able to obtain them. Their lots allow it.
That's a policy decision.
Right.
I don't know if the planner is comfortable with saying it the opposite, saying a single family unit and allowable conditional uses if approved, other than multifamily use. That's the opposite way of saying it.
So-
Every other
Sure.
CU, if approved, and we have a new law on CUs, and so they have rights to CUs to a certain extent now. And
If it's allowable under the code, why are we going to restrict it, period?
Yeah, why say anything about,
Because I don't want a neighbor who doesn't want an in-law unit to say, giving notice that the use is limited to a single-family residential only. Reading that literally, you can't do anything
Right.
other than a single-family residential only that would not allow CUs.
Fair enough. How about we take out only?
Well, does that broaden it so that then the multifamily CU might be allowed?
If it's allowed under the code, why are we restricting it?
Because the county's concerned that, well, okay, now we go back to the other issue, all right? If we're gonna allow multifamily, it's limited to 8, and you gotta decide which lot gets those 8. That was the original question. This side of the road gets 8.
We don't have to decide.
Yes, we do.
The developer, whoever
No.
buys the lots,
We're
has to
creating
decide.
4 lots, and you have to make some determination so that lot 1 doesn't buy it thinking he can have a duplex, and lot 2 thinks they can have a fourplex, and lot 3 thinks they can have a single family.
But why is that our problem?
It is our problem because we're rezoning it and we should deal with it so that we don't have to say, they're gonna come in and say, there's 8 here. The first person in doesn't necessarily get it.
But why is that our problem? That's between the seller of the property and the buyer of the property.
It's our problem when they come and apply for a building permit and there's 8 units allowed for that side of the road.
well, and what we're saying is that the way the lots are being divided into 4 lots with not a lot of depth here, not a lot of access, that 4 duplexes wouldn't necessarily work on this anyways.
Right.
So, Mr. Mayor, the reason this came up is because I've been working with the county on years when there's a density issue. You sell off a farm that has a density of 8 units, and you sell off 1 lot, and there's certain ways the county, you have to disclose whether that 1 lot gets, how many units that 1 lot gets. The norm is the 1 lot that gets sold off gets one DUI or whatever you want to call it, one of the density.
Densities, right.
Because when you have zoning that says it's 2 acre zoning, but 1 acre lot size, it gets confusing.
All right, then can we say that there's 8 units on the west side and a maximum of 2 per lot? Nope.
If,
can say that.
if you put that condition in, anyone who wants to propose a duplex and it falls within the county zoning, which I'm not sure how you would avoid that with these lots, it's almost split down the middle there. They'd have to come back for another rezone. They'd have to rezone it to R3 in the shoreland area. So I think that,
But
they
that does
initially,
address my issue. It doesn't address the county's issue,
Right.
but I want to say, yes, that's absolutely. That's what I proposed to them from the first place. We say there are 8, we say each lot gets 2. They're limited to a maximum of 2. And if they can figure out a way to do it, including rezoning at the county level, they have to follow all the red tape regardless. But yes, that's a way to resolve it.
Let's
But
resolve
when he
it.
called the petitioners and they said, we're willing to limit it to 1 unit per lot, we thought then I didn't have to deal with the density issue and who gets the density.
Why don't you come on up, Mike? Does fiduciary want to limit it to 1 unit per lot?
I mean, our intent with this is to sell these off as single-family parcels.
Okay. Do you want to restrict yourself?
Well, I guess I hadn't considered all these options until Attorney Macy brought them up.
Thank you.
Well, I can always just sit and not use the expertise we've developed all these years and wait till the problem arises. But I think part of my job is to try to address issues that might be coming down the pipe.
Understood.
But I don't have to.
I think the concern is going to be if we start to go down that route is that this property has been very muddy. I think we all can agree for the last 8 years since the land use plan amendment. And this is a pretty clean way to have an appropriate density on the west side of the road where we can still, address the 44. You can transfer that over. I mean, it was 48 for the entire property. No one said that 8 has to be on the west side and 40 have to be on the east side. It was for the total land holdings. So
Just to clarify, the west side was limited to no more than 8.
to no more than 8.
Yeah,
but
so the west side was limited. The east side, not necessarily.
right. But it didn't have to be 8. It they could have done 4 previously. I think
Right.
you actually initially had proposed this exact same CSM a few years ago.
Right, we've come full circle.
Come full circle, right?
Do you, Mike, would fiduciary want to wait another 6 or 8 months and bring this back after you think about it?
I guess I would like to have the I'd like to have the opportunity to at least discuss it internally.
It's fine with us. I mean, are we gonna hold the public hearing open then? And
I mean, the way, at this point in time, I mean, the way I'm reading it, noticed in, I mean, in common sense English, it says to accommodate 4 single-family residential lots. I don't think it's appropriate even to have the discussion tonight to be talking about putting duplexes on there the way that's noticed. I think that's totally out of order. What's that?
That's how we started this whole discussion. Does that include an in-law suite? Do we allow an in-law suite? Based on your common English interpretation, does that allow?
I guess
an
that
in-law
depends
suite?
on what our code says about that.
Well,
If
our
it's
code
silent
says
here.
that you can have an in-law suite with a conditional use.
And I guess that's it, but it doesn't say duplex.
but you can
But you can have a duplex with a conditional use.
But
That's the
not in this
conversation.
notification. It talks about 4 single-family residential lots.
That's fine, but we can also have a conditional use. It doesn't, notices don't necessarily have to speak to a conditional use.
The intent, if I could just clarify, the intent after speaking with fiduciary, when I asked about, is this the end game for this property, was told yes. And originally I had some conditions in there alluding to maybe preserving the 8 units on the west side. But after I'd found out and talked that it wasn't going to be an issue, that this was the last of it, this is the final configuration, we worded it to limit it to single family residential. I think even if you took it back and you talked about it, the fact of the matter is it's R1 zone in the town. County zoning would be R1 as well. They wouldn't be able to do anything but single family unless it was again rezoned to R3 in the county. So whether or not there's no options baked into R1 for duplexes because the county zoning won't allow that.
And
So
I may be able to clarify too, the in-law portion, in our code, the in-law suites, the definition is a room or suite of rooms used or occupied as a separate housekeeping entity and located in a single family dwelling occupied by persons related by blood or marriage to the family or persons occupying the single family dwelling. We also require, as part of the CU, a deed restriction saying that it's limited, the in-law suite is limited to people by blood or marriage. And if it's sold and they want to continue using it as such, they have to come back and get plan commission approval. So I think that we've always considered in-law units to be a portion of a single family home, and we do not consider them multi-family residential units.
Can I ask one other question? And it may be a simple answer, but I see even under the possible suggested conditions, lots 1 through 4 shall not be further subdivided. Somebody, I guess, simply tell me what is the mechanism by which that can be enforced going forward?
In the staff report for the certified survey map, I had it as a note on the CSM. So there'd be a note in the CSM that lots 1 through 4 would not be subdivided. Beyond that, I'm not sure there's any other mechanism except a deed restriction.
Okay, so if it's that way on the CSM, then that's enforceable that 40 years from now, somebody can't re-subdivide those lots?
It'd be on the CSM.
As long as somebody remembers the notes on the CSM, absolutely, they have to amend the CSM to redivide the lot.
Thank you.
Does that give you any further clarification?
Yeah, I'm fine if we move forward with stating that each lot will accommodate a single family residence as long as in-law suites, as Rebecca stated, are allowed.
So then we could take off only, and could we move forward if we take off only out of that sentence? Period. That work for everybody?
So limited to a single family residence.
If the word all is put in after only. you know, I think that-
No, we take only out.
Yeah,
A
I
single
understand,
family.
but she added the word all.
Like, it's a single family residence.
Word I don't believe is in there. I'm looking for it. I was reading the code. I'm sorry. I was.
Sorry, I thought we were making the change.
To all single family residents.
Okay,
That's, yes,
taking out only and putting
I'm changing it to residents, not residential.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? Going once? Going twice? Then we can close the public hearing. And we can move on to the Plan Commission items. At this time, it'd be appropriate for the board members not on the Plan Commission to vacate.
Gonna stay for the proposal.
No, you have to stay for the whole meeting.
It's a long one.
Then we can move on with Plan Commission discussion and possible action on the certified survey map. Petitioner is Joey Winooski. The owner is Fiduciary Real Estate Development, River Road, County I, also known as Lathers property. Text keys are WAKT 14119960001 and part of WAKT 14219980004. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Is there a motion?
You can do the same thing. No, I'm not gonna. You're gonna prove it, good.
Okay, I will move to recommend the approval or acceptance of the amending the conditions that previously approved rezone in order to accommodate 4 single-family residential lots for the subject property with the staff recommendations that have been provided. And I would simply ask, did you resolve the clarification that you wanted to the wording, I believe, is it at the end of the 3rd staff recommendation? And I would accept whatever as part of the motion, whatever language you wanted in that.
And just to clarify, Supervisor Fisher, this is for the certified survey map, correct? Is that what your motion? would
Correct.
pertain to?
Correct.
And Planner Malaki?
Just a couple, I was confused at first. I thought we were talking about the
Yeah.
rezoning. So,
I'm sorry, for the certified survey.
yeah, so if we're talking about the certified survey map, I had no questions or comments except to mention that the lots 1 through 4 would not be subdivided with a note on the CSM. We'll change the deed restriction to match what we talked about in the public hearing. But I believe Engineer Janelli had a few comments on the certified survey
All
map.
right, well, let's see if we can get a second before we move on. Is there a second?
I second that.
And Engineer Janelli?
Yes, I have a letter that should be before you dated March 27th that has several comments on it. Most of them are kind of technical in nature. Item 4, I think we kind of heard this evening that that was kind of taken care of. In our review, we noticed that the driveway's location seems somewhat different, not by a lot, from the CSM that was approved previously. And it was our concern that we just make sure that, and they added an access for lot 4, I believe it was, in comparison to the CSM that was recorded previously. And so we wanted to make sure that the county was okay with the 3rd access and the locations of all 3, and it sounds like they are, so that should be fine. We recommend that a shared access easement for lots 1 and 2 be depicted and described on the CSM and be of sufficient size to accommodate driveways to both properties. We recommend a minimum size of 60 by 60, but we'd be open to other sizes if it's a problem for you at 60 by 60. Number 6, I think we took care of already with Sean's planner report as far as not splitting the lots again. So I think that's about it for my letter. Why don't you do about nothing at this point, I think.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you want that motion amended or restated if the seconder is comfortable to incorporate those comments and requirements, or what's your
That would be
pleasure?
fine if you want to incorporate those in your motion, yes.
I would, and it does refer to the certified survey map, approval of the certified survey map.
And Commissioner White. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to B, the rezone. Petitioner is Joey Winooski. Owner is Fiduciary Real Estate Development. This is on River Road, County I, known as the Lathers property, part of WAKT 141-199-6001 and WAKT 142-199-8004. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Is there a motion?
I'd so move.
And a second. And any discussion?
I assume the motion was to adopt the recommendation of the planning commission? Of the planning commission, because they changed the planner's recommendation. So isn't it to adopt the recommendation of,
The
we're on the
public hearing.
rezoning, right? So it's to adopt the recommendation of the planning commission, not the planner, because the planner's conditions were changed.
Of the public hearing, wouldn't it be? Because the board was part of that.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're the planning commission. I'm
Yes.
jumped ahead. So this is the recommendation to adopt the conditions as modified, conditions of the planner as modified and discussed at the public hearing. And it's also a recommendation to the county to include that.
Commissioner Stigler? And Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to C, certified survey map. Petitioner is Alan Kale from Kale Builders, West 237 South 4866 Big Bend Road, part of WAKT 139-8035. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Roy Barczyk. Doggone it. Malecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the petitioner is requesting review of a CSM for the division of a 2.2 acre lot into 2 lots. The property is located at the southeast corner of Big Bend Road and Merlin Lane. Lot 1 would be 1.14 acres and would have the existing home on it. Lot 2 would be 1.13 acres. The existing lot is actually lot 35 of Innovale Farm, Addition 2, which was recorded in 1991. The proposed CSM is consistent with the requirements of lot area and width for the R1 zoning district. In terms of setbacks and offsets, there's a couple of issues to mention here. The existing home that's on lot 1 is actually less than 50 feet from Merlin Lane, so it is 46.2 feet from Big Bend Road. So that property is non-conforming, but it's a legal non-conforming home that can continue to exist. I just wanted to point that out. There's also on the CSM, the setbacks that are shown are shown, or I'm sorry, the offsets that are shown as 10 feet. Since this is zoned R1, the offsets are actually 20 feet. So there's an existing outbuilding that's shown just adjacent to the 10-foot offset, which would either need to be moved or removed from the lot because it's too close to the required offset. In addition, the aerial photograph shows an existing garage that's on lot 1 that would be too close to the offset as well. That's not shown on the CSM, so I'm not certain if that building is proposed to be saved or not. So that would be a question for the petitioner that I did not have answered. In terms of shoreline zoning, portion of the property is shoreline zoning. Pretty much the lower 2/3 of the property is within county jurisdiction. It's also zoned R1 county. which has the same lot width and setback and offset as towns, so that would not be an issue as well. I do believe Engineer Janelli has a couple of comments on the CSM as well.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I have a letter dated March 27th in which I have, I think, 12 comments, the first 6 of which are rather, technical and drafting, labeling type issues that we've seen in comparison to Chapter 236. I think comment number 7, per the Town of Waukesha, Chapter 7, additional setbacks or building lines required by the Town of Waukesha Plan Commission, which are more restrictive than the regulations of the zoning district. The proposed CSM appears to be in the vicinity of Mill Creek, and based on recent aerial photography and GIS data, may appear to contain wetlands or slopes in excess of 15%. So we're thinking a wetland delineation should be done. Comment number 8, similar with respect to floodplain. I'm not sure the floodplain, if there is floodplain, it should be shown. If there isn't floodplain, it should be labeled as such on the CSM. On comment number 9, there's some location, area, and depth of the soil absorption waste disposal systems for each building site should be shown. I believe the septic for lot 1 is actually on lot 2. So we'd like to make sure that that's shown, and whether it looked like their documentation, they were going to move that, I believe. Is that correct?
I believe the septic from lot 1 is going to be
Create a
moved.
new one.
Yeah, they just don't have them shown as you'd mentioned.
So we would like to see that properly labeled and identified as such. And then comment number 10 is very similar with respect to delineating conservancy or environmental corridor associated with the wetlands and shoreline.
Where do you show, Chris, where do you show the environmental corridor and or wetlands? Whereabouts are they? If you could tell me
I
just.
think it's to the south of the property. I don't know if you got it.
Can you tell me by elevation?
I don't think we can do that.
Oh,
actually.
okay.
I'm going to pull up the map here.
Yes. So we're way to the south of the property, and they propose a building pad well to the north. Why would we make them go through if it's not required, why would we make them go through the process of a delineation?
And you don't have to. That's up to the Plan Commission. I'm just kind of going through your laundry list of things that are associated with CSM and trying to bring them up.
What does the code require?
If our code doesn't require wetland delineation, and that's the responsibility of the county, I don't know why we're diving into that at all.
I don't know that that's the responsibility of the county.
Well, county and DNR handle wetlands.
No.
There's shoreline zoning on this. So there's county jurisdiction here. If there, it's not the code's not specific in terms of wetland delineation. We require it where it looks like it might be an impact to something, the lot or the septic system or whatever it might be. So it's hard, maybe it's tough to see the map up here, but I have shown what's currently delineated as conservancy based on the aerial photographs. And you can see it follows the south lot line. So this delineation, not delineation, but what's shown in the GIS system shows it following the south lot line. But if you look at the aerial photograph, it appears that, some of this could
be
possibly be wet to the north.
Right.
When you say we require it, define we. That's in our
The
code.
town requires wetland delineation on CSMs, yes. Now, it looks like it's off the property according to the aerial, but according to GIS data, but if you look at the aerial closely, it looks like there may in fact, some of this southern portion of the lot may in fact be wet. It's unknown.
Well, don't want to be argumentative, but I don't know what you're basing that on. The GIS is historically very, very accurate.
The GIS, the wetland data for there is probably based on DNR aerial photograph wetland data, which is not necessarily accurate. It's based on when it was done in 2010, I believe, was like the last time it was done.
A lot of that is based on soil reports, which are not real accurate. Aerial photography, which changes over time.
So I guess the point that I'll make, and those were Chris's comments, but I guess the existing home is pretty far north on lot 1. The new home on lot 2 would be pretty far north as well. The septic fields would be further south. So those would be, those are the only thing we'd be concerned about. And maybe the applicant can speak to the wetland issues on the property.
Yeah, the existing, hi, I'm Aaron Colley. The existing septic, I already had that looked at as far as for Parks and Land, and that we would use that existing leach bed for the new property for the new home. And that was looked at last week.
So you hook up to that one for the new home?
Yeah, it's a 4-bedroom.
And then for the old home?
The old one, we're putting a new leach bed, which I've already done the soil tests on it, and that's going to go in the front yard on Big Bend Road.
Up here?
No, go down
Here.
right there.
Right
Yep.
there, yeah.
And I also have another area that I tested, which is in the front for a leach bed, closest to the road there. So I have actually 2 spots.
So what you're saying then is the new septic for lot 1 would be well out of the way of the wetlands, and the existing one is already there, so that's
Correct.
not a concern for the
Correct.
wetlands.
Yep. Just to kind of discuss that barn is down already. So I have a building permit plus the raise permit. So
Okay.
that's down. One thought I had is that old milk house is, I know it's a 10-foot setback right now, but it's also a historic element that would be nice to keep on that property. But if it's something I got to go further on a variance for, then I'll just knock it down.
Well, you'd need to do you have to do a 20-foot setback, so is it possible to move that?
No, it's like, yeah, no, it wouldn't be real possible. It's all stone. Yeah. It's about 30 inches wide, thick stone in there, but it's in like perfect shape. But in fact, the owner that wants to purchase that lot right now would love it to stay there, but I understand that we have to meet setbacks as well. Our survey also is, from the time I submitted that, pretty much every item except the wetland delineation is not done, just because we can't do that. Usually you have to wait till about end of April, which that's the one I wanted to kind of avoid, just because I know that land and area. But everything else is updated, which we would submit to you.
Thank you.
The chairman's asked me a question about, I think, and I'll defer to the engineer and the planner for sure, his surveyor has to sign and seal that he has met all the requirements of the code. By doing so and not showing wetlands, he's under his license saying there are no wetlands on his property, since it's a requirement of our code to show wetlands.
We've waived it before.
I don't want to use that either, because I don't know. Then we should have put on the agenda,
But
on the agenda item for a waiver of a requirement. That's a land division waiver, right? Not a zoning code waiver. So,
Land division, right?
yeah, we found it in the land division.
right, it's a land division requirement.
But when does it come into play is my question, because GIS doesn't show anything on his
Right.
property. So if it doesn't show wetlands on his property, why are we getting involved with it is my question.
Because it appears like perhaps there could be some.
Perhaps there could be, but it doesn't show that.
If you want to ignore the comment, I'm all about that. But I brought it to your attention, and I don't know what.
And now with the evidence that where the new septic for lot 1 is going to go and the existing septic that's going to serve lot 2 is already there, it's probably less of an issue.
Thank you.
I guess the bottom line for me, if our code requires that to be delineated on the certified survey map, and there's any possibility that some of that might be wetland, I don't think we can look the other way.
But
We don't
it's
have a
not.
we don't
it's
have a
not on there.
representation, do we, from the registered land surveyor that is absolute assurance that there's nothing there, I don't think we can look the other way. It's just that simple.
But if it's not shown on the map and the GIS map, why would we do it?
That's different than a delineation. Okay, that's your answer.
And the other reason, regardless of where somebody wants to maybe put a house someday, if somebody may be putting a septic someday, I don't know where the new owner wants to put accessory structures or may want to start to fill if it is a wetland. So many communities would be concerned about whether there's wetlands, just to give notice to a potential buyer that there's wetlands, and there are certain laws that follow with that wetland. So I just want to say that. I'm not saying that you, and Sean's right, you can waive it, but make it part of the motion you're waiving it, or you just tell a surveyor he's got to be able to certify there are no wetlands on this property as part of this process.
Right. So just to clarify my comment about we waived it before in the past, there was, I don't remember the name of the property, but while I was here, there was a wetland in the property, but it was far enough away from anything that it didn't matter. And the condition that was made, it was waived, but there was a note that basically says that when this was further divided in the future, then it would be surveyed at that time. So that was the compromise that was made in that case. That's not necessarily the same case here because these won't be further divided.
My only, I guess, point on this is, I mean, we have been deliberating this issue for several minutes now. We've got staff recommendations about it. I mean, this is going to be memorialized in a videotape that's kept forever and that type of thing. Petitioners come in here and say, gee, there might be wetland there, but I don't think it's that close and I wouldn't build the house there. I mean, at this point in time, I mean, there are requirements as to how close you can be to the front and side yard and rear yard setbacks and everything. But for us to sit here and divine where somebody might want to build a house or put the septic system, that defeats the whole purpose. If it's a requirement of the ordinance, it needs to be followed. I think it's real simple.
I have a comment. Good.
Go ahead.
Realize now that you would be hooking up to the other septic system in your field. Do we have a secondary septic system already shown where if this one would fail, where it would go?
Yes, I do have in fact, I already had it looked at the existing system by the city of Waukesha, Parks and Land. So they looked at that, but I also have a soil test for the front yard so there's 2 spots for the lot.
I don't believe that's required any longer.
I just want to make sure because it's wetland.
Plus I did a Form A on this, even though it really wasn't required. And we went down 12 feet with no groundwater issues in early spring. So, I mean, just in regard to groundwater in Waukesha and wetland, we're not even close to where we would be. What was that? Parks and Land came out, or sanitary came out to look at the existing system. One, to see if it was, the county came out. Yeah, I apologize. The county came out, and it's an existing 4-bedroom, and they gave us a letter stating, which they were going to give to the town, stating that that system was good to use for a new house on there for a 4-bedroom. But if they were going to go bigger, we'd have to use the other site.
Do you anticipate putting the new system in before filing the CSM or after?
I'm not putting any system in for somebody if I'm not building on it.
No, I mean, well, you're replacing lot 1's getting a new system. You said in the
Lot 1 system, yeah, I'm rehabbing that house right now in that system. So basically, I'm cutting the system to the lot that I'm dividing to sell, and then my tanks and everything will go to the new leach bed.
More specifically, I apologize. We either have to have it as a condition that it has to be, the new system has to be in place before we sign it, or he has to show an easement. We can't ignore the issue. And I'm trying to discern which way we want to go. Maybe we should just write that as a condition that the easement for the septic on lot 2 has to be shown as a potential easement, or the new system on lot 1 has to be done. You can't ignore it.
You're cutting off the system from the system that's serving lot 1 right now. You're cutting off using it for lot 2. Lot 1 gets a new
Leach bed.
septic
Yep.
system, new leach bed. Okay.
Correct, which I have to have that in before occupancy or before I sell that house.
Okay, so we can make that then a condition of the CSM. Would that be accurate?
No, well, you can't sell the house, I guess, but he's saying occupancy or sale of the house, but that doesn't mean creation of the CSM. It has to be when we're going to sign the CSM.
Can
How
we
about-
use it as a termination? Because I got to terminate that, go into that leach bed. I terminate that, go into that system, and then that leach bed is just left there for that new lot. And then obviously for me to get occupancy on that house, I have to put that other leach bed in that serves with the tank that I have. So we could just cut off that system as part of the split.
I think let's make it easier. Can it be as a condition of the CSM, of signing the CSM, that the new leach bed has to be in place?
Absolutely.
Would that be acceptable?
I can't put it in right now, so therefore I couldn't close on that lot early enough. The ground's too wet. So
Lot
That-
1 or lot 2?
so lot 1 is the house that's existing. That's the rehab. Lot
Right.
2, I have an offer in on it and they want to close instantly so they can build. So I want to be able to cut that off because I have 3-4 months on rehabbing that house. A lot of times you can't, whether I'm building new construction, I can't put a mound or a system in
Understood.
until it's dry.
But this goes to, well, okay. One of the commissioners asked what the request is that as a condition of approval of the certified surveyman, they cut off the existing leach bed and leave it on lot 2, and lot 1 have no leach bed. So that he can sell 2, and at some point before he sells lot 1, he'll put the leach bed in. That's a policy decision as to whether that's acceptable. It's a little different than what we normally do because you require proof that the leach bed is good before you approve the split. I mean, and don't we? I mean, Kathy, isn't that? part of
I have that already.
put in the packet?
That was
You have
done.
what?
That approval of that leach bed being good. That's already complete.
But it won't be on the lot.
It's not built yet, but he has proof that it'll work.
Correct. Yep.
But when we sign the CSM, it won't be on the lot, so there has to be an easement. He's suggesting instead of an easement, he just terminate it. And that's an option, and that's a policy decision that he terminate the leach bed for lot 1, leaving it a lot 2, so he doesn't need the easement. But that leaves lot 1 with a building with no leach bed. That's another policy decision as to whether you're willing to do that. That's your decision. You want to create a lot that has a building that doesn't have a leach bed. But it's not built.
He has soil tests that the county have said will work.
So you can't sell that house, put anybody in that house until that lease is complete.
I don't know that that's true. Somebody's willing to buy it and say, I'll put the leach bed in.
I'm talking about not buying or selling, I'm talking about occupying.
You could base it on occupancy then, if that's what you would
We
want
have-
to do.
We have no control over an existing house on occupancy as far as I know. I mean, he's got permits pulled for a rehab or?
I do, and the raise of the barn that I took down. I have all the permits.
I'll defer to the clerk if she knows, can speak for the building inspector as to whether or not it'll require an occupancy permit. I think it depends on what kind of remodeling permit he
Well,
has.
we took down a full upstairs, it's gonna need an occupancy permit before he gets.
The comment from the clerk was he took down an exterior wall and will need an occupancy permit from the building inspector prior to occupancy.
Put this condition into that. For exterior walls and occupancy, we're gonna add that onto it, say that,
Is it conditional?
as a conditional.
As a condition of the CSM,
Yes, that'd be great, correct?
be an odd condition in the CSM, but can we put that in there, planner?
Repeat the condition.
Have a condition on, he already has, he has to have an occupancy permit now to get the building done, right, outside wall, he's talking about this on there. You can't occupy the building until that wall is done, in fact. They can start with that condition and say they can't get occupancy permit along with that, those conditions. He's not gonna get occupancy for the house until this leach
Right.
He's got to have a functioning.
Yes, it's got to have a functioning septic system before he has occupancy.
That's what I'm saying. I said, I don't-
Yeah.
it's not common, right?
We make sure everybody's using their microphones.
You have electricity. I mean, you could function, the toilets could function unless you take them off in the next month or two.
True.
The water's shut down on it because I'm not running heat in there.
I think the bottom line is he's not getting occupancy on the house without a working septic system. I don't know what we're beating this up about.
That's what I'm trying to say, is I said, he can't get in, nobody's gonna live in that house if he
Beating it
can't
up
get a
to find out
bathroom.
which of the 4 or 5 different options is the appropriate option. You've got to have one of the options. If one of the options is, as a condition of signing, he will disconnect to the building inspector's satisfaction, the existing system, and that's satisfactory, that's one of the options. All I brought it up is because you got to either put the easement on or you got to build it. And he threw out a third one, which was fine. They're all options, and it's a policy decision, not a law, as to which of those you want to do. I just didn't want to ignore it.
Fair enough. Do you have any objection to disconnecting that system prior to signing the CSM?
No objection.
Okay. So then,
That's what he proposed. But the building does have to go down. And you have to give notice to whoever you sell to that the building is legal non-conforming in its location to too close. It's an existing building, so you have rights, but it's too close to the road,
Gotcha.
the second road. We're just bringing these to your attention.
You bet.
we should actually have a motion on the table in a second before discussion, and my apologies, I didn't follow proper procedure. Is there a motion before we continue any further discussion?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
No,
before we do that?
let's get a motion on the table first.
Kathy was asked.
No, that was previous.
Sorry,
Stigler
Stigler?
and Miller, that was the previous one. It was a rezone. I don't think we had a motion or a second. So can we get a motion in a second before we continue discussion, please?
I would like to make a motion here, but I'm not sure now with all this discussion, what it's actually, how it's gonna be worded, but the
Well,
intent.
Give it your best shot.
It's a motion to accept the planner's recommendation and conditions with one additional condition that prior to signing the certified survey map, he has to disconnect the septic system. The leach pad.
Okay, and he could still have.
That's
He
the
will not
first,
get-
that's the motion. John wants a motion. Did I properly state the motion? It's subject to your proposed conditions, and his conditions include removal of that building, just so you know.
And my conditions include meeting Chris's conditions as well, including the wetland delineation.
Right.
Is that acceptable?
Yes.
In a second.
I second.
Thank you. Supervisor Fisher.
Yeah, just a question, and I'm going to clarify that. But question, I guess, for Planner Malarkey, can you build an accessory building in a wetland?
No.
Okay, and then I think that, for me, underscores again the very reason we need the wetland delineation on that property. So, and that's part of the motion, and I fully support that.
And I would disagree because we don't show any wetlands on his property. So we're asking somebody to delineate something that doesn't exist on his property. We're making that up.
We don't know that it doesn't exist on his property. Because it's not on the drawing does not mean it doesn't exist on his property. We've been through that 8 times.
Can I?
We
stop?
don't-
Wait, I want to hear the wording of the condition. What was the wording of the, I'm trying to find the letter here and well, that's not what they incorporated. They incorporated your condition. And so it depends on how your condition, you know, if your condition is to satisfy the code.
It says, per the town of Waukesha, chapter 7, section 12.7.2, parent H. Additional setbacks or building lines required by the town of Waukesha Plan Commission, which are more restrictive than the regulations of the zoning district. The proposed CSM appears to be in the vicinity of Mill Creek and based on 2015 property evidence of Waukesha County GIS data. Here may contain wetlands and slopes. The town may require wetland delineation to determine protected wetland building setbacks.
But by that, then we could be, any property may contain wetlands. We should be delineating every property. And that's nonsense. It doesn't show wetlands on his property. It doesn't show an environmental corridor on his property. And we're going to force him to go through some extra nonsense. I absolutely disagree.
Okay, now that we've read the condition is not clear to me as to whether or not a wetland delineation is required or not. And the motion incorporated language that says the town may require a wetland delineation. It doesn't say in the condition. So I'm going to have to ask the maker of the motion, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, what is your intent? Is that they meet the code, that they have to do a wetland delineation? If their surveyor is willing to, under oath say that there is no wetlands on this property and he certifies there's no wetlands, is that adequate? That meets the code.
I want to meet the code. I mean, that's always been our goal here, I think. And like Brian says, I agree with that we got to, if we're going to sidestep the code, there's no point to having the codes. But as John says, if his surveyor is willing to make a statement here to say that there is no wetlands on there, then I think we met the code. Correct, John?
And does that work for you?
Works for me.
Okay. So if you can get your surveyor.
So that sentence is got to be modified slightly. The requirements, the above noted requirements must be satisfied. Is that fine?
Sure. Is that clear as mud for you?
I mean, if his person walks out there and can say, it's here's the lot line.
Well, I guess I've got a follow-up question, and I may be able to support that. In what form does who's the registered land surveyor on this? In what form and manner and where does he need to make that representation? It needs to be in writing, I'm assuming. Verbal isn't going to be good enough. So it will be on the certified survey map that there are no wetlands on that property?
I would say it's going to be on this document right here.
Is that the certified survey map?
Survey.
No, that's a grading.
Sorry, survey.
I want to read what he certified.
Here we go.
I was looking to see whether he's certifying that this document is in compliance with all of the local ordinances. Do you know?
So we've got, I have fully complied with the provision of chapter 236 of Wisconsin statutes and plating ordinance of the town of Waukesha on surveying, dividing and mapping same.
That's what I was looking for. He's putting his license on the line if he says, if he doesn't show wetlands, then there are wetlands, right?
Yeah.
That's what it says. That's what the sentence I was looking for.
Okay, so therefore, we do meet the code, correct?
Yes.
Well, we're going to bring to his attention, there's the potentiality of wetlands, and by him signing this, he's, under his
Yes,
seal.
and I have to say for Chris's point, I know the creek is right there. I mean, I understand where he's coming from, but if there's no wetlands involved in this property on this survey, then so be it.
There's a creek very close by.
It is close.
Really close.
Is the creek the lot line of your property?
No.
Because
It's
we as a
probably-
staff wondered how they could show a wetland line that so clearly follows the lot line. It's not normal that wetlands follow property lot lines. With wetland creek, that would be very unique. That's why that's why it's of interest.
Mr. Wright probably did that then. A long time
My
ago.
concern is on the bottom of this, it says unplotted lands on the bottom of the survey.
Well, it always,
I'm not sure how close the creek is, if that's his land that is.
It's a good 50 feet off the property line. The stakes are there right now. But then there's quite a bit of a drop off to the creek. There's actually a cliff to the creek.
Can we ask as a condition of it? I mean, I understand, probably every survey that ever gets done has the language on it about complying with state statutes and everything. Can we ask that this specific certified survey map then have a notation on it that there are no wetlands on those? I mean, that's not unreasonable to ask that, is it?
At time of survey,
What?
at time of survey, there were no wetlands, because the wetlands could creep on in the next 20
Well,
years.
of course.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, you have time off, we can't predict the future.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if we asked that be done, that would certainly call his attention to the issue specifically. And I'd have comfort with that.
Well, the proper procedure would be to make a motion to amend the motion on the table to require the surveyor to add a note and, under his signature, make the statement that there are no wetlands at this time on these lands.
I will so move that amendment.
Well, Supervisor Stigler has
No.
to, no, I'm
Anybody
sorry, it's
can
an
make a
amendment,
motion
you're
to
right.
amend.
And a second.
Let me vote on the amendment. I'll second.
Yes.
Second Brian's motion.
Does everybody understand the amendment? We vote on the amendment.
So I'm asking, so it's basically two parts, right? If there's a wetland, it should be delineated, and if there is not, it should be certified that there is not.
Fair enough. Regarding the Fisher-Miller motion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to the Stigler-White motion,
I have a question.
please.
Have we sufficiently discussed your existing outbuilding? The milk house, I think it was?
Yes, the law, there's a condition that it has to be removed and the law requires it to be removed. And I did make that mention several times in the minutes, and he's indicated as much as he'd like to keep it. He realizes if it's, we can't create a new lot line that makes a new legal non-conforming building. Your house is legal non-conforming, but none of the lot lines we're creating created the legal non-conformity. So since your outbuilding, you could move the line to save it, which is, I believe, Mr. Planner, that you said that would be an option if they can still meet the requirements?
Yeah, the lot size is more important, so we'll just try moving it or taking it down.
They marked it wrong, it's 20 feet. Oh, we caught that.
Never mind. Question was stupid.
No. It came up because of the bigger building more than the little building, because the bigger building is even closer. So we knew the bigger building was less than 10 feet. And then your planner caught the fact that they marked 10 feet and it's really a 20-foot side yard.
Thank you.
Did I say that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Does that satisfy your question, Commissioner Miller?
Yep.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
As amended.
As amended. And you'll be before the town board soon, hopefully.
Tonight.
Yeah, tonight. On to D, accessory building. Petitioners are Thomas and Victoria Heckers. Location is W221S3224 Racine Avenue. Tax key is WAKT 1345991. This is for a recommendation to the town board. Planner Malarkey, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This property is zoned R2, single-family residential. It is 1.65 acres. The petitioner is looking to build a new home on the property in addition to an accessory building. The issue is the accessory building that's being proposed is larger than is allowed by the zoning ordinance. What's proposed is a 34.5 by 61.5 foot accessory building, which is about 1,978 square feet, to be used for the storage of personal items and a vehicle collection. The existing home, there's an existing home on the property that will be raised or may have already been raised, has not been raised. So that will be raised to make way for the new house and the new accessory building. So this is sort of a precursor. They haven't built the house. They haven't raised the house. They want to see if they can get permission to build the accessory building as proposed first. The other issue is that this is actually two separate parcels under common ownership. So they need to combine the parcels via CSM after they get approval for the accessory building as well, which would happen at a later date. So normally what's allowed based on the lot size of 1.65 acres would be an accessory building of 12 square feet. And again, what they're proposing is 1,900 square feet. So they would need an actual waiver from the provisions of the accessory building section of the ordinance. The Plan Commission and board would need to make a determination, which should include consideration, but not necessarily an affirmative finding of the following factors: whether it's inconsistent or contradictory to the purpose, spirit, or intent of the zoning ordinance, whether it violates the spirit or general intent of the chapter, whether the request is contrary to the public health, safety, or welfare, whether the request is hazardous, harmful, noxious, offensive, or a nuisance by reason of noise, dust, smoke, traffic congestion, odor, or other similar factors, whether for any other reason the request will cause substantial adverse effect on the property values and general desirability of the neighborhood, whether the request is incompatible to the surrounding land uses. The proposed accessory building meets all other requirements of the ordinance except for size. It meets setback requirements. I do believe that the property owner has stated that they have spoke to the neighbors about it and have received positive feedback, though I don't know exactly which residents were spoken to, so maybe the petitioner can clarify that when they get up to speak. And then the Plan Commission will have to make the determination that the proposed accessory building is also in compliance with the requirement for compatibility with the proposed accessory building. They did provide drawings with the application of the proposed house and the proposed accessory building. You can see these two buildings were designed together as a pair by an architect. The buildings both share the same materials, same basic roof patterns, same proportion of window openings and door openings, et cetera. So they work as a pair in tandem. If the Plan Commission chooses to approve the request for the accessory building and the waiver, I have prepared a series of conditions, general conditions, including the waiver itself.
Thank you. And are the petitioners here this evening? Good evening. Is there a motion?
I move to approve. No, Tom Heckers, we're the petitioner. Well, you asked, so. Any questions?
First, I'd like to get a motion on the table, please. Because we're going to follow Robert's Rules of Order, which means there's a motion and a second before discussion.
Without discussing, can we ask a question or no?
Negative. Motion and a second. That's Robert's Rules of Order. I'll make the motion for approval according to the qualifications and conditions in the planner's report. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I got Commissioner White. A little faster on your feet next time. Questions for the petitioner or planner?
Yeah, I guess I got a question, maybe just a big picture part of it. I mean, it looks like you're proposing to build a very nice home and accessory building. Have you considered the possibility of not building that very large detached accessory building? So, I mean, to build it integrally with the house, or at least part of it, so we wouldn't have to go through this matter?
Considered it. In fact, our first plan had a 6-car garage in the house. My partner didn't feel it was acceptable to have my car collection outside of residence, attached to a residence. I've got a collection of cars, right? I presently have 8 classic cars. My intent is to scale it down to 4. And I wanted to keep the cars together as a collection rather than separate them, some at the house in an attached garage and some at my accessory building. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'd prefer to keep my collection intact.
Yeah, I understand, appreciate that. I was just kind of looking for, well, I mean, the exception that you're looking for is what, not too far from double, which allowed by ordinance. I was just trying to see if we could find a way out of it. I mean, you're making a significant investment here and it looks like they'd be attractive buildings. That's not the issue. I just thought maybe it might make some sense not to have that large of a detached structure. That's what prompted the question.
I'm going to go one step farther. He's thinking the same thought process. Do you have an attached garage already? Is there going to be a garage?
Yes,
in the
a
house
two-car
besides
attached
this building?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The 2-car attached garage would be on the northeast. Our original plan, as I said earlier, original plans was a 6-car garage, but that wasn't going to work.
Question.
Commissioner Miller.
Question, comment, I guess. Is it still someplace within our code that they have to do the house before they can do the accessory building?
Well, there's an existing house there now.
Right, but does that have to be?
They can't build the accessory building before the house, but that doesn't mean they couldn't get approval for the accessory building and build them at the same time.
Thank you.
And that's why we're going through this right now. If we can't do the accessory building, then our plans to build the new house are kind of in limbo, you know? So we've got to weigh our options too.
Yeah, no, because there was problems years ago.
What's that, Mr.
So
Miller?
there was problems years ago with accessory buildings being built prior to building a house.
But it'd be okay if we did them at the same time.
Yes.
You got to come on up to the microphone, ma'am.
I'm the other guy. I'm Vicky. I understand from your code, and I read it, is that we can't have occupancy of the accessory building without having occupancy of the house. Is that correct?
Well, right. We wouldn't issue the building permit for the accessory building unless they were done together.
Right.
Further questions?
What we tried to do with the placement of the building, and I don't know if you can go back to that previous picture, we tried to place it in the far northeast corner, making it obscure from visibly from Racine Avenue, as well as from our neighbors. So we've got neighbors, you know, on all sides except Racine Avenue, and the placement was probably the most discreet area.
And I did go to, we sent letters to all the neighbors when we bought the property back in July, indicating what we were planning, call us if there was any problems. We talked to several, there was no problems. And then we went back to all of them within the last 2 weeks, six of them, I believe, anybody 300 feet, square feet close to the building. And they were delightful. They applauded us. One lady tried to sell me one of her cars.
I got one other question, I guess, just try it a little bit other way. I mean, would it at all be something to consider building a 4-car garage in conjunction with the house and then scaling the accessory building back to the 1,200 square feet or something closer to it?
Can I answer that one?
Sure.
My place of residence. That's why we did this. Plus, it keeps everything separate. And yeah, I like your idea is fine, but we're doing that now. We want to come out to the country. We live downtown in Waukesha, and we're ready to come out to if you don't put a baseball stadium across the street and you allow us to do this, we'll be very good neighbors. We'll design a nice house. We'll be good community partners. But we really need to have it this way. 2-car garage on the house, that's our residence. This is his playground.
I think they're two very, very good-looking structures. I think they'll be a fine addition to the town of Waukesha, and I take no issue with it whatsoever. Any further comments? We've got a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries, and that was for a recommendation to the town board, which will be coming up soon.
Thank you.
On to E, determination of status of the use of property. The petitioner is Art Gamroth Jr. Location is South 17 West 22234 Anoka Ave. Tax key is WAKT 1297940. Is for a recommendation to the town board. Is there a motion? Pardon? Yeah, sure.
So Mr. Gamroth owns the property on Cotton and Anoka.
The property he purchased, he has stated, is a four-family property. He has sold the property, and the person he sold it to now needs to get bank authorization. The bank wants, because it's in a residential district, the bank wants a conditional use for it being a four-family instead of a single-family property. He's come to the board to ask if the evidence he has is enough for him to come forward with a conditional use.
Thank you. Is there a motion? I will make a motion for review of the evidence to potentially grant a conditional use. Is there a second?
Second it.
Discussion. Is Mr. Gamroth here tonight?
Yeah, my father and I are both.
Good evening.
Up here. Yes, just in case there's any questions. Hi, I'm Todd, Art's son. His hearing is a little not so good, so I'm here to help along with that.
Thank you. Questions for the petitioner? Planner? Clerk?
So currently, the property is a four-family. It's in a single-family district. If he cannot get a conditional use, the property would have to go back to being a single-family home, which it has not been a single-family home.
Well, no, technically, they could still claim it's a legal non-conforming use and still, but that doesn't, for all of these years,
Thank you.
they've claimed that it's a legal non-conforming use. Correct? They
Correct.
sold it on a land contract. The woman who's buying on a land contract wants to pay it off, go to the bank, get money to pay them off, and the bank smartly is saying, if you can't upgrade, prove that it's a legal non-conforming, and better yet, get it a conditional use, which gives them the right to rebuild the legal non-conforming use, she can't borrow the money. So they, as a courtesy, are coming in on her behalf to try to get the conditional use. Prior to applying for the conditional use, they thought they would submit all of the evidence to make sure that it looks like it's ready to go to hearing so that they can apply for the conditional use. Because if it's not, they want to go get more evidence and find more people who may have more evidence. The staff felt that they had provided enough evidence that they could go to the conditional use, but they thought that was a plan commission, just comments. There's no motion I don't think we're proposing necessarily, but it's comments that they're ready to go to the conditional use. They opted, they've been working on this for quite a while, and they opted, let's do a two-step process based on their working with the clerk.
Well, aren't we going to have to make a motion to approve a conditional use for the property?
You got to hold the public hearing.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the next
They've got to
meeting.
file for the conditional use. This
Okay.
is sort of a conceptual review.
Fair enough.
We told them that we could make a motion tonight saying we acknowledge that it has legal non-conforming use rights. That's not enough for the bank, okay? And some property owners have come in to do that. Just say, just acknowledge in the minutes that we have legal non-conforming rights, and we'll live with that. But they've stated and she stated they would like the conditional use. That's better. You have more rights with the conditional use than you do with just the legal non-conforming use.
We do.
They
do. Okay.
They're protected. The conditional use is probably going to say, if this burns down, they can rebuild it.
Okay.
It won't do her good if it doesn't. But that right now, you can't rebuild a legal non-conforming use if it burns down. A use, the legal non-conforming use, you can rebuild it as a single family, but not as a use. They want the right to rebuild it as a four family. You get that right by getting a conditional use.
And what is the underlying zoning, or what is the zoning of the property?
R3.
R3.
Correct.
Thank you.
So basically, we're just going to tell Mr. Gamroth, assuming we all agree, that he should get with the clerk and schedule a public hearing. Is that
apply for the conditional use.
Okay.
Legal non-conforming conditional use.
Is there enough information? Did the plan commission feel that this was enough information and proof for him to move forward?
I have one question. How old is the building? How long has it been?
Well, my father bought it in 1961 as a four-family and then remodeled it, gutted it basically and remodeled it and updated it. The pictures I submitted and currently the picture of the garage, that garage originally had a house on top of the end garage that the family he bought from, there was people living in it. That got tore off. It's a 5-car garage, so obviously it matches the property and said house that was a 4-family. When he bought it, he just updated it. But the point is that since 1950s, whenever the actual building was built, it was built as a multi-family, 4-family, whatever they called it back then. Proof showing the picture of the structure, proof showing the multiple garages on site. I also looked up some of the requirements for in case it burnt down, and they were saying, well, it doesn't comply. I think it's 50 foot from the front is requirement, which it meets. The side of the house, it's 1 foot for every foot of level above the first floor, and to meet to the side, the Cotton Court side. But even the town has, over the years, has debated whether or not that's actually a road. That's never been plowed by the town because they've stated it. They don't consider it a road. So
To answer your question, 1936.
Okay, I guess that's what I want to know. I have no idea.
yeah.
It was,
Who bought it, but I want to know when it was originally built.
yeah, and it was built prior to our zoning codes.
I knew it would be. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you I didn't know exactly when it was built.
That's okay.
So, Mr. Miller, you feel you've got enough information to move forward? And Stigler, and how about Supervisor Fisher?
Yeah, I just want to hear what the motion is again. It's to schedule.
There isn't going to be a
schedule
motion.
public hearing.
Yeah, this is just a recommendation to the petitioner to meet with the clerk and schedule a public hearing for conditional use.
Okay, so there's no motion.
Correct. Thank you.
Yes. What
Huh?
did you want to do?
I'm agreed.
Yeah, well, he shook his head early on. He was an early adopter. Thank you. On to F, site plan of operation for Michael Steffen. This is Forward Lacrosse. Location is W240 South 5225 Quincy Lane, Unit 2. Tax key is WAKT 14019970008. This is for a recommendation to the town board. And Planner Malarkey, take it away.
Thank you. The property is 1.73 acres. It's zone B2. A similar petition was in front of the Plan Commission and board for use of the former LDC pet store on condominium unit number 2. This was put forward by Sticks Academy, the business to the north. They also currently lease the subject property. This actual petition is not by Sticks, but from Forward Lacrosse, which would be a sublessee to Sticks on the property. At the December 2016 meeting, this the request from Sticks was actually tabled. For request for additional information, we went back and we looked at those meeting minutes, and we explained this last time that the big issue with the previous process and the reason it was tabled was the parking layout. There's some questions about the parking layout and whether the building needed state approval building code for a change of use. Sticks returned for application on January 11th. It was again tabled at that time in conjunction with the request for the property to the north because of the outstanding landscaping issues for that particular property. As I mentioned, this Forward Lacrosse is currently petitioned this as a sublessee at this point. This was also on the Plan Commission agenda and was tabled by the Plan Commission and board on March 8th. At that point in time, the meeting ran long and the petitioner was no longer available when we got to the agenda item on the agenda. So the whole purpose of this, the facility would be used for specialized lacrosse training. Training sessions would run approximately 50 to 60 minutes in length, and high school players would attend, would generally be self-driven. The petitioner anticipates 1 to 6 athletes and 1 to 2 coaches at any time when use the facility. The petitioner is not proposing any interior or exterior renovations except installation of protective netting around the playing area to protect the walls and the lighting. Installation of outdoor turf carpeting and general maintenance and painting would also be done. So we talked about this a couple months ago, but I just want to reiterate about the building use and certification of occupancy. In discussions with the building inspector, he made it clear to me that the town could approve the use in the building based on square footage and the volume of the use. It's the IBC classifies this as a type B building, does not require sprinklers. However, the maximum occupancy is limited to 15. Anything beyond that would require sprinklers. The petitioner is not looking to put sprinklers in at this time. The building inspector would require proper egress and exit lights, and also a slop sink that would be installed as well. As I mentioned before, the petitioner is not looking to amend the site plan. The hours of operation would be Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday to Sunday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. There was a discrepancy that Commissioner Fisher pointed out to me at a couple months ago. I did try to contact the petitioner on a couple occasions through email and once through phone. In one location, it mentioned Friday in the application, and the other location, it left Friday off. So there's a question as to whether or not Friday hours are needed. We can ask the petitioner if Friday is included. The maximum number of employees would be up to 2 coaches per training session, and then the maximum number of athletes per training session would be 6 persons with no company vehicles. In terms of parking, there are 21 parking stalls on the lot now. Currently, our code doesn't specify required parking spaces for this particular use, which would be a private commercial recreational facility. So the analysis that I did was basically at any one time there'd be 2 coaches and 6 athletes. The athletes are probably self-driven, but in case they are not and driven by their parents, and they'd say that would be 8 vehicles at any one time. If you factor in turnover, say there's one group shows up and the next group replaces them, that would be double that. So at any one point, there's probably 16 total spaces that would be occupied by the use. There's 21, I believe there's adequate parking on the site. So if the Plan Commission chooses to approve, I have listed a series of conditions outlining the plan of operation, limiting the maximum number of occupants to 15 people, complying with the site plan. Environmental health would need to approve this, and then the building inspector and fire chief would also approve outside of standard conditions.
Thank you. Is there a motion? I will make a motion for approval. Is there a second? And it was Stigler. Is Mr. Stefan here tonight? Come on up. Counselor, I do have.
We need his name and
I'm sorry.
At least the business address. We don't need your personal address.
Just Ryan Rappis. Business address, I can get that to you. This would be Forward Lacrosse, which would be Mike's address, which I don't know off the top of my head. So.
Okay.
Because of the classification of the building, they are limited to 15 people in the building. What happens if the fire inspector goes in and finds 26 kids in the building? What can the town do to enforce a limit of 15 people?
Well, I'd have to check the code, and I'll defer and see if the planner knows the answer off the top of his head. Do we have a penalty provision we probably have a penalty provision in the zoning code, and they're in violation of the site plan and plan of operation approval, and so they could probably be cited for a ticket.
It'd be zoning violation.
Zoning violation. We also could bring a long form summons and complaint. and, ultimately revoke the site plan and plan of operation. They're only limited not because of the building, because of the remodel and the improvements they don't want to make to the building that would allow for greater people to be in the building.
Right.
Yeah. I
Lack
just
of
want
a
to
sprinkler
clarify.
specifically.
I don't know if it's the bathroom or the sprinkler or both. I thought
It's
it was the
both.
bathroom.
Yeah, it's the bathroom and the sprinklers.
Fair enough.
And so, so they could get a ticket, or we could bring along for them someone's complaint and get a restraining order and keep them from using the building.
So that's the purpose of that question, was to make sure that everybody is fully aware that there's 15 people in the building, maximum occupancy.
Correct.
Okay.
And then even in question, it's a partnership really with Sticks. And so let's say parents, dropped off their kids. There's not going to be any kind of waiting area. That's going to be right next door where there's couches and a TV. So they would just go over there anyways. There's plenty of room over there. So there's not going to be any room. And there's not enough space for that many people to do the kind of training that's necessary to have more than 6 or 7 kids at a time.
Okay. Supervisor Fisher.
Yeah, I've got a question and a concern really, and maybe some questions relates to the parking. I have aware of several complaints have been advised about parking as it relates to the big building, the Sticks building, that there is parking. Times people are parking vehicles on the roadway.
Right.
I'm concerned, I think, and I haven't observed this often, but I think some of those parking stalls that are being counted as part of the 21 for this building are being used by people who use the Sticks buildings. Is that not true? And I mean, you've got these parking lots are linked together, but apparently there's at times insufficient amount of parking space for the Sticks building. Now, the fire chief even asked me, was unable to be here tonight, to pass along, he thought, an understanding, Planner Malarkey, of the approval even for the Sticks building was posting the road with no parking signs. And I don't think it's posted that way. He has a significant concern about access for emergency vehicles. So I've got a real concern about the parking part of it. We can look at on paper what we think there is, but if there's insufficient parking at the Sticks building now and they're using some of these parking spaces and out on the road, I think that's a problem.
Well, I got to tell you, I am by there often enough. While there may not be signage up, the Sticks building is a whole separate issue. These are two mutually exclusive issues, number one. Number two, I know where those complaints are coming from. I think everybody in this room knows where those complaints are coming from, and they're bogus complaints. So I don't even think we should be addressing it.
They're not, I don't mean to argue with Chairman Rick, they're not mutually exclusive because they're using, the Sticks building is using this parking area now. They're connected. They're not mutually exclusive. Well, they are. That's a reality. There's no sense to argue with it. They are.
You can argue all you want. They're mutually exclusive. They're two separate site plans and plans of operation. They're two separate parcels. They're two separate buildings. They're two separate businesses.
And why are the driveways connected?
Driveways are connected all the time on condominiums. All condominium driveways are connected.
I think you answered the question. Thank you.
I did. All condominium driveways are connected. Absolutely. Any other questions?
I'll just add on, just curious, and you don't have the answer, that's fine, but how many places are marked over there? Do you have a number that are marked on the facility? Are they actually paved and actually marked?
They are 21.
I had never been there, I'm just curious. And they're all marked.
Yeah, looking at photographs, I didn't look at every single one, but the photographs
wanna
showed
see
marked
if they were
spaces, yes.
Anything further? Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. That was for a recommendation to the board. We'll meet on that shortly. G has been moved to May, so we can move on to H, site plan of operation for Charles Nelson, businesses advanced panel and controls. Location is South 40 West 24220 Rockwood Way. Tax key is WAKT 138-1999019. This is for a recommendation to the town board. And it's time for the Malarkey report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's an existing building on the parcel. The parcel is 1.26 acres. It's zoned I-1 industrial at the end of Rockwood Way. The existing building is about 6,000 square feet. It's 60 by 100. They want to do an extension or an addition to the building to the west. The addition would be 4,500 square feet straight west, for a total of 10,500 square feet. 70% of the additional workspace will be for work area. 30% of the additional building would be used for storage. The petitioner is also proposing to build a new unisex bathroom in the existing portion of the building as part of this remodel. In the future, up to 8 additional employees would be added over time. The hours of operation for the business would remain the same. The business is in a electrical panel and control assembly operation, which is advanced panels and control. So hours of operation currently are 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. With the additional 8 employees, there'd be a maximum of 22 employees. Parking on site would be limited to employee vehicles only. No outside storage is proposed. There's an existing outdoor dumpster, which is currently screened with a fence that was required for the previous site plan approval. In terms of parking, our code requires 1 space per each employee during any 12-hour period, and then 1 space for 300 square feet of office space for industrial and warehouse buildings. So in essence, this would require 1 parking space for each of the 22 employees, and then 2 spaces for approximately 400 square feet of office space for a total of 24 spaces. There's currently 25 striped spaces on the lot, which would meet the requirements of the ordinance. In terms of landscaping for already existing lots, they're proposing an addition. Once the addition exceeds 25% of the assessed value of the existing building, they'd be required to do landscaping for the addition. That is the case here. They are required to do 105 landscape points based on the total 10,500 square feet of building. They have provided 138 points of landscaping along the eastern edge of the building, sort of the most visible area of the building. They've placed it on the base. So I think that's an appropriate location for the landscape, and I think the landscaping meets the requirements of the ordinance. They have talked to the county in terms of stormwater management. The county has asked them to do an erosion control plan, which they have done. And they had to do a small site stormwater permit application. The county is not requiring them to do a stormwater plan, but has asked that they put $2,500 deposit just to make sure that everything works out in the end, which would be refunded once the county takes a look at the site. There's an existing drainage way on the west side of the property, which would be used in the same regard that it's used now. The building addition would not encroach into that. The county did take a look at the site and the soils and thought that there was a possibility that there might be some wetlands on the west side of the site, and asked the petitioner just to take a look to see if there's any indicators. Their engineer had looked at the site and said that there was nothing that was indicative of wetlands. This is kind of a similar situation to the last one we talked about. So we'd ask as a condition of that there would be a statement that there's no wetlands observed on the site itself. In terms of architecture, we require, even for industrial and warehouse buildings, some brick and decorative masonry for facades that face the road and is visible from the road. This addition is not facing or necessarily visible from the road, so I think that's not applicable. They are proposing 1 additional wall-mounted LED light, which is downward facing. Our ordinance requires that it's cut off up to no more than 3-foot candles at the lot line. They did do a bit of a photometric plan that shows the maximum measurement is 1.6 foot candles, and then it actually measures 0-foot candles at any lot line. They're not proposing any signage as part of this, and that all setbacks, et cetera, match the I-1 zoning. If the Plan Commission chooses to recommend this for approval, I've prepared a series of conditions, including the plan of operation, that there's no outdoor storage of materials and equipment, that the existing dumpsters continues to be screened, and then again, as I mentioned, that documentation that no wetlands exist in the property, and that any improvements would be located no closer than 75 foot from any wetland. They would have to require approval and satisfy all conditions of Waukesha County land resources for erosion control and stormwater, and the rest are standard conditions.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I'll move that we recommend approval of the request to the town board.
In a second.
Second.
And discussion, is the petitioner here this evening? Good evening.
Good evening. I'm George Pittman, the general contractor. The petitioners are back here, the president and owner of the.
Little closer to the mic.
I'm sorry. I'm George Pittman, the general contractor. Petitioners, Chuck Nelson and his son Chaz Nelson are back here. They're the president and owner of the corporation if you need them, but perhaps I can answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner and or the planner?
No.
Seeing none, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You'll be
Thank
before
you.
the town board shortly. Number 7, approval of minutes from March 8th and, I'm sorry, February 8th, 2018 and March 8th. Madam Clerk, was everybody present at both meetings?
Ken Miller was absent on February.
Then we'll take February 8th separately. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes plan commission meeting of February 8th, 2018.
In a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And abstain. What's that?
I abstained because I wasn't here.
I know, but we couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Abstained.
On to B, March 8th, 2018 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Approve.
And was that Mr. Miller again?
Yeah.
And a second. And Supervisor Fisher. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And number 8, is there a motion for adjournment?
So move. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Let's take a 5-minute or so break.
What's the pit? Oh, the rock.
You know, somebody said he was looking on it, and show up and say yes or no. There's a difference between working for work's sake and working to get something done.